So I've got a few different environments up. This one I didn't model. This is actually from a Sketchfab model that I just downloaded and kind of interpreted for Hubs or for my Hubs Cloud MetaHood. But I'm going to open up these two galleries. They're the same gallery, but they have different lighting on them. Oh, let me see if I can get that back up here. Just want to pop this out. And probably should have loaded them up before, but I'll also just load up the blend files.
The models that you use for your gallery?
Yep.
Okay.
Yep. The models and is this environment map, which is like a new thing in Hubs, which is a reflection map for everything. But it doesn't quite work on this space, and I'll explain a little bit why later.
And this reflection map is like the light baking. Like, honestly, I didn't understand very well what is light baking. I was trying to look on Google and probably I have an idea.
Okay, yep.
But not so clear.
Perfect. Yeah, no, great question. So light baking is actually just taking the path tracing, the ray tracing lights like area lights and all the bounce light and all that stuff and just baking it onto a texture. And then applying that
into the texture.
Yeah, it's actually it's a separate texture in this case. So you have this tileable, like this tileable plaster material, and it's just tiling a whole bunch of times. And then you have this other 32-bit floating point HDR light map, which has all the darks and values, all the shadows, and it basically just multiplies on top in the render. So that way you get dark corners, and where the light is really bright, it's actually just going to leave the texture as its core color. And if the light is brighter than 1, because it's a 32-bit texture, if it's really, really bright, then it will actually increase the brightness.
Connor?
Yep.
You might want to explain why that's important. She might not...
Yeah, I mean, it's basically because, it's a great point. Dynamic lights, as you can see here, actually, there's like a shadow mistake. Dynamic lights need to be rendered every single frame. And at 60 frames per second, lights are very computation heavy. So you might only have one light in here. I only have one skylight. It's one directional light. And even right now, the shadows aren't being casted, even though they're supposed to be. So if I refresh, then I think it will actually get dynamic shadows. But dynamic shadows across mobile devices or lower end access hardware are a bit of a mess. Like it's one of the more expensive processing that it needs to happen. So the more that you bake the lights in, the more that it just turns them into textures and it loads once. It does need to render the texture every frame with what's called draw calls, but now I have the dynamic shadows in here, and the light bake shadows. So I have two lighting systems happening here. I have one directional light, which is actually a dynamic light, which means it's being rendered in real time. And then I have all these other lights on here that are light baked, which they're just baked down into texture. And this is actually selling it way, way short, because while this is an HDR map, it is a 32-bit floating point map. My current instance of my Hubs Cloud doesn't support floating point textures, so it's getting compressed down into 8-bit, so that way it can be seen here. But if you go to like hubs.mozilla.com, or if you get the if they update Hubs Cloud very soon, or if you're smart enough to go to GitHub and update your fork, your branch of Mozilla Hubs to the latest one, and just does that make sense, or do you want me to explain that a little bit, what I'm talking about?
I got it totally. Yeah, okay, I understand.
So yeah, if I were to update my fork to match the latest in Mozilla Hubs, then I would be able to have 32-bit maps, and that's why I have my Office actually on Mozilla Hubs, because it is 32-bit texture maps, and that's why the lighting in this one looks so awesome. So that's like kind of light bake maps and their intentions. But you can combine them. You can see like I've lined up my directional light, my dynamic directional light, and the light that I baked with at the exact same spot. So it appears as if they're the same. You know, you can see that little line there. It appears as if they're the same, but it's actually just two different lights. One of them was rendered offline in cycles in Blender, which this will kill my render, but it looks like this. Let me just make it smaller here. Oh, I have all my lights turned off. Let's see. I'm going to turn these on. Do I have to turn them all on individually? No, yeah, it's loading in. So you can see I've got a bunch of lights here on the ground, and like each one of these is like a little light, and there's lights behind the logo, and so you can see that all this it's taking a long time to render as well. I haven't updated to Blender 3, which uses Cycles X, which is going to be a lot faster than the current version of Cycles. But I have all this like offline rendering where it's like, you know, rendering ray tracing the way Arnold does or the way Redshift does or whatever. But then I bake that into a texture, which looks like.
You can bake it here in Blender?
Yep.
Okay.
Let's pause this so it's not taking forever. This is what it looks like.
Oh, that's cool. Yeah.
It's just baking the light down, and then this texture is multiplied on top of the tile. So this gives you, there's a couple advantages to this. Like, not only does it give you really nice lighting, but it's actually more optimized. So the lighting is nicer and it loads better. Like, so there's no reason not to do this. The only reason there is not to do this is that it's non-dynamic, which means it won't cast shadows. If you walk in front of one of these lights, like, nothing happens because it's baked onto the wall. And well, it takes a long time to bake textures. Like, it takes a long time because it's basically like a render. You know how when you're like rendering out turntables in Arnold and it's like 7 minutes a frame and you have 240 frames and then it takes hours to do it all? Well, it's the same. But now you're actually rendering it to a texture instead of to like a 1280 by 720 or 1920 by 1080 frame. You're actually rendering it to a 4K or 2K map. And 2K maps are like bigger than 1920 by 1080. 4K maps are huge, and so the render time for light baking can take a long time. There are people that are less particular about it than me that just use low samples and just denoise because you can see there's some sampling noise on here. You could just denoise it, right? But it's not as pretty if you have higher sampling count. And if you have a really high sampling count, then you get like these little marble normal map stuff, and you can actually use displacement to cast shadows that will like cast the shadows of a brick through the grout and all that, and that will all be baked out and rendered out in the lighting and baked into the texture, and you won't have to actually displace anything in render time. And like, I accidentally once baked this with a smooth let's see, what is it to smooth? I forget what it is to smooth. I baked this with a smooth subdivider on it, and it baked all the lighting as if this was like like it was like, I forget what the hotkey is, but I'll just add a subdivision modifier on here. It baked it like this. It baked it with the higher resolution polygons there, and baking that onto the low poly, you could actually see all these like polygons as they moved across, and it looked like it was high poly, and I was like, oh wow, it was an accident. But you could actually bake high resolution lighting onto low poly models to get even higher fidelity, like even cooler looking models.
That's cool.
Yeah, and of course it's like the baking high poly normal maps or like high poly geos normal maps onto low poly. It's the same thing, but it's actually not normal maps this time. It's actually light and how light falls off. So yeah,
Cool.
that's what light baking is, and I'm a super nerd about it, and that's why my office, looks like this. I just join this room here. You can see the lighting in here is like, it's sorry, the frame rate's a little bit rough. The lighting in here is like super considered. Like, I made sure to try to do, and this is even like already I'm seeing a lot of stuff that could be improved. But this is
but you can feel the atmosphere of the room.
Totally, yeah. And like the exposure on the texture, it's almost clipping. It's like so bright in here, and you can see this gradient on the floor. If I just back up into the corner here, the gradient of the floor goes from like really bright all the way to really dark. That's because it's 32-bit floating point texture. You have the data to go from really bright. We could even go further to really dark, but. Yeah, I don't on my version of MetaHood because you can see it's like, it's not quite there, right? It's just kind of flatter and not as contrasty. It doesn't have the brightness that this one does.
Yeah, I know what you mean.
So I will be updating my Hubs Cloud soon, so I can update my gallery and do like an HD remake of the gallery, which will be really fun and really nice. But for now, and I can actually. Oh yeah, I did load this one up. Let me cancel this. So I'll show you the difference between dynamic lighting and light baking, because dynamic lighting is a lot faster to set up. Like you don't need to set up all these area lights everywhere and render it out, especially for all the different rooms that I have, because I have 7 rooms, right? But I hacked it. Because each one of these rooms, and this is one of the things I wanted to talk about today in terms of like modeling. So now we're going to talk a little bit. Well, let me just close the door on the lighting conversation, and then I'll start talking about how I set this up in models. So this is all dynamic lights. Oh, sorry. There we go. That's all dynamic shadows, right? So these are all being calculated in real time. And you can see, it's not as pretty. Like you don't get that depth of shadow and stuff like that. Like it's nice because it's all one light, and I've got a big this is a gallery that we did, and it's cool. It's all light, and that's fun, and it's dynamic, and it's all the way over here. But it is not as pretty. It is more pixelated. And the shadows don't have any real depth to them. And you can see like where the connection of the floor is to the walls here. Like it's just not like, yeah, I couldn't have all the lights that are in here. Like I couldn't have them because that would just be, it would be dozens of lights. Even having, I wanted to have a single light for each room, but that would be 7 lights on top of the directional light, 8 lights. And it's just too much to render 8 lights in real time, 60 frames per second for a phone, even for a nice computer that's still pushing it, right? So I needed to bake the lighting. And so you can see this as an example of like the difference between baked lighting.
Oh, yeah.
And this isn't even 32-bit yet. Like this is still 8-bit lighting. So when I'm update this to the way it is in the office, it's going to look really nice.
Yeah.
But that's kind of lighting, light baking, and why we do it, what it does.
Thank you, Connor.
No worries. So, yeah, and I have these two. This is the older one, and this is the newer one. And then I'm going to have a, I don't know if you saw this, but this was like my first office. And you can see it loads up quick. Like it's pretty well optimized.
Oh, yeah.
But it's different than the new one. It's got a lot of like artifacting on the sides here. It's still the same intention, right? But not as nice, right?
Yeah.
Not nearly as nice. So it's the same ideas here at play, but even this is something. Okay, so now we're going to talk about modeling. Modeling right here this is a problem. I just didn't really know that this would be a problem. This was the first environment I built in Hubs, right? And I didn't know that having the floor not match up perfectly to the sides of the walls would actually create light bleeding, because the resolution of the light map says that this pixel is outside, but that pixel actually goes to the other side of the wall, right? So you end up having to snap all this stuff. And if you check out my newer one, you'll see that that's what I've done. But I snap all these corners in, as well as, if I just pop up in here, there's a little bit of a weird where these two intersect. Like there's an absence of something. It's just wood going straight into carpet, and that's not super duper realistic looking. So around corners and around edges like that, on my new one, I just added a trim.
Oh, yeah.
And it's a subtle little trim, but it helps. It helps the integration. And so it's not very many more pixels. I mean, polygons. It's not like super terrible high poly. It's still pretty well optimized, but it's nice to have that little trim there. And it's actually modeled in. Oops, I went through the floor. It's actually modeled in. And you can see that on the outside here, I've actually snapped like the floor to the very corner, so they're in exactly the same spot. And then the trim, the trim isn't sitting on top of the wood. The trim is actually snapped to the wood, so it's actually changing the topology there in a connected way. So this takes a long time. Like even for just like a little environment like this, I had to go through every single edge and snap every single corner all the way down through here, and then over to here, and then snap all these, and then come back around, snap these ones all the way around. But then what you get as a result is like, it's really nice. It's clean. It's consistent, right? And it has a little break. I would actually even make this a little bit larger if I were to redo it. But I realized if I gave this another inch, I would have to re-snap everything on the floor again. And I was just like, forget it.
No.
Yeah. But yep, I went through and snapped all this stuff, so it is exactly perfect. And that helps with the aesthetic of where two different materials combine, as well as it helps with the light mapping, so you don't get the light bleeding like that, which is just not as clean as it could be. It's just a little bit uglier than necessary. But yeah, big difference, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so that's kind of puts a button on all the lighting stuff, and I'm going to talk about how I modeled this gallery, unless there's any other questions on that.
I'm good, thank you.
Awesome, great. Okay, so I cheated on the gallery, because you see that if you look at it from above, these 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 rooms are all they're all the same. They're all modular. Right? And it's all a part of an octagon, which is actually based off of a sketch. Let's see if I still have it.
Sketch that you made?
No, it's a sketch that Leonardo da Vinci made.
Oh, so it's not just like a reference, Leonardo. It's seriously something that he drew.
Yeah, it's this one. Yeah. Now it's very, very different. Like I needed to change this a lot, and obviously we don't have these cool domes. And this is amazing. I didn't have this before. I didn't see this one. I don't know when this was uploaded, but this would have been really nice if I had that. So you can see I've changed it quite significantly, right? But the original intention is still kind of there. Those 7. I mean, he has a full 8, right? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. No, it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Yeah, and 8 is the entranceway.
Yeah,
right. And so I would probably, like I would need to have this one. I don't want the multi-cut tool, please. Need to have that something like that big and there, in order to kind of match that same thing. And And that probably would have been cooler because, every time I notice any design differences between what I've done and what he drew, it's like, his is way better. Of course it is.
It's Leonardo.
Yeah,
Yeah.
but it's loosely inspired. But I basically had this one. And I just kind of modeled out each one of these edges here. And his basilica is huge and has really nice hallways that actually, that connect between each one of the rooms.
Mhm.
But it was just getting like too elaborate. Also, having these statues on the outside in these sections would be so awesome.
Yeah.
But yeah, we're running out of polygons, right?
Yep.
So in here, I actually have it so that, I could show you an earlier version to show you how I changed it, but I have the inside, not the light. Give me the walls. There we go. I have the inside as a separate mesh from the outside. And the inside, there they are, right? Each one of these insides has the same lighting on all of them. They all have the same light here, all, that trim lighting and a couple of spotlights to shine onto the walls. So they all have the exact same. So I actually just light baked one.
And then duplicate.
Yeah, and have the overlapping UVs. Let's see if I can find it. Room ceiling, room walls. Yep, just like that. And there's my light bake. And of course, it looks so much nicer in here because this is the actual. Oh no, this is me color correcting it, trying to get it to a nice contrast and nice dynamic range because it is a PNG, so it is 8-bit, which sucks. But this was before I had the ability to host 32-bit textures, so I was just trying to do what I could. But I have that one room, and this one room has the same lighting for all of them. Now, it's a bit of a cheat because if you actually look at, this room, one of the rooms, this one on the end here, oops. Uh-oh, crashing. If I just drop these back in, one of the rooms should be catching the sunlight. This is the sun, right? It's sending in light through the ceiling here, and it should be hitting a little bit of these walls, right? But it's not, because I just have it being exactly the same in all the rooms. But now I have a 2K texture, a 2K light map across every single room, and it's essentially for free. I mean, it costs one 2K light map, but they're all the same. This one should have a little bit more light in it because it's actually getting hit by the sunlight. Just a little bit, but it doesn't. But who the hell would notice?
No one. Yeah.
Right? So it's not really that big of a deal. And these are all the same. And is it a little bit weird that they're all exactly the same? Yeah. Would it be nicer if they all had a little bit of variation in intensity and in color? Absolutely. It would look awesome if they did. But is it worth having 7 times the texture maps? No, it's untenable. We won't be able to do that. So I have one light map for the inside of the room, and then I have, a light bake for the ceiling here, which is accounting for the normal map, just giving a little bit of those deeper shadows between the tiles. But it's pretty uniformly lit because I have a couple lights here just hitting it from all sides, which is just fine. It's kind of what would happen in a museum environment, I think. And then I have my roof tiles, which are the tiles on the outside, which are really grossly ugly light mapped, but don't really need a lot of resolution for these anyways, because if they're outside and no one's going to be floating above. There's my plaster material, which has the shadows on the ground and the different, shadows being cast here. Again, it would be so nice if I was able to actually use this HDR, but I can't yet. I would love to, but don't have the. I'm waiting for Mozilla to update their Hubs cloud because I'm not gonna start going in and manually doing that stuff. It's too smart for me. I'm too dumb for it. But yep, then I've got my marble walls. This is marble extras, which again, this is a light bake UV projection, which I never ever, like if I were to redo this, I wouldn't do this again because it creates a lot of problems blending between the different UV shells here, of which there are like a million. Like some of these UV shells are 1 polygon large. And the problem that creates is if you look, called a MIP mapping problem. Do you know what MIP mapping is?
No.
MIP mapping is what you see right here. You see this dark line?
Yeah.
As I get closer, that dark line disappears like a mirage in the desert,
Uh-oh.
right? Because as I get closer, it's loading in the texture, like it's rendering the full-size texture across all the pixels that can see it. Actually, let me just test this. Let me see if this makes it worse. No, because it's the same size. Okay. So I have, let's say, 200 by 200 pixels here, or it's probably more. It's probably like 500 by 500 pixels here. And that's enough to display all the detail. But as I get further and further from it, it starts getting smaller and smaller. Now it's only like 20 by 20. And so the edges of the light map are needing to be averaged into this 20 by 20 square. And some of them are starting to bleed outside of their UVs. Let me just see if I can find. Yeah. Some of them are starting to bleed outside of their UVs, and we're getting some of this texture here. Right? So the UVs on this thing look like this. Oh, let me switch it to the light map. Oh, this is broken anyways. Wait a second. Yeah, that's not right. It's broken. It's been a while since I've opened up this scene, so it's not, okay. Not up to date. Oh, I didn't have a light. There it is. Okay. So the UVs look like this. So if I'm trying to fit this many pixels, if I'm trying to fit this many pixels from here to here onto a screen resolution of like 50 pixels, at some point, like this gets scaled down and scaled down and scaled down and scaled down, and we start to get some of these other colors that are overlapping, because this section here is only like 10 pixels, right? And so when it gets scaled down and scaled down, it starts to bleed, and then we get that problem there. So the way to solve this is actually to have more margin between your islands, like more space between the shells. But then that's a resolution cost. But this is like an artifacting thing where I'm like, oh, I thought it was good enough, but it wasn't. I mean, how often are you going to be walking all the way out here and then turn around and see that? But people walk towards the entrance all the time, and so that's visible. I don't like it. I wish it was better, because you can actually see if you get far enough away. And if you're looking straight on, you don't really notice it until you're really far away. But if you're at an angle, then it starts to become a problem, because it's just it's basically transforming that texture sideways, skewing it a lot, and then you can see actually like the whole wireframe of like where every seam is. So not pretty. So instead, like one of the things that I do instead is instead of using this light map pack, which I was using before, I just unwrap everything by hand. Yeah, like look at this, is intense. This is going to have MIP mapping problems everywhere. On every polygon it's going to have MIP mapping problems. Like look at these. How many pixels are really going to fit onto this? So instead I'm now just unwrapping everything as like a whole piece, and basically using the same unwraps that I have for the tileable texture, which are a little bit more thought out. Of course, they're all overlapping right now, but it just makes more sense seam-wise, and then using that as a base for my light bake. But you can see that this is older. I haven't done that yet. Another thing that is super, super worth knowing about like optimization is that wasted polygons aren't just wasted polygons, they're also wasted texture space. So if I hide these interior ones, now you can imagine how I built this. I modeled one of these pieces with all of its walls, and I duplicated it all around, right? But if I had, oops, how do I isolate? I want to Alt H? No, Shift H. Yeah, there we go. So this is basically what one of them looked like, and it's duplicated all the way around. But if I model one of these, then if I hide this, the interior walls will be there, right?
Oh, yeah.
But they're not. I've actually cleaned them up. And the reason why I cleaned them up is because I had one big ass wall polygon here, and on the other side, another big ass wall polygon that was sitting in here taking up a huge amount of texture space and its extra polygons. And the texture space for inside of the wall was just black. So I actually had to modularly design this so that way I could model it, just duplicate this all the way around. But then once it's finalized, I actually had to bake these all in and then go in and delete all these interior edges and then sew it together. And then delete them here, and then sew it together, and then delete them here and sew it together. And then I, across the top here, I created this, because this used to go all the way down. And when it went all the way down, we had a whole bunch of polygons that were basically just pure black, that were taking up light space, taking up light bake texture space. And so instead, I just shortened them and then put a little filler there. So that way it's less wasted space, less wasted polygons. And then you do that to the whole thing, and it's a big pain in the butt if you need to change something, because if you need to change something on one of these rooms, like I noticed that, oh no, this polygon right here was like this, and it was bent, and it looked really ugly, and it was bent on all 7 of them. Then I had to delete all of these, flatten that one out,
and
then reduplicate them all the way around, and then go through and delete all these walls again. So optimization does come at the very, very, very end, when the design is permanent, when it's no longer going to change. Otherwise, you're basically asking yourself to redo work instead of saving time. But that's one of the things where it's modular design is awesome. Modular design allows you to have repeating textures, repeating light maps. It allows you to save a lot on modeling time. It's a nice design element because people know what to expect when they enter each room, because it's the same as all the other rooms. And so you can add variety and stuff by adding in different assets and different different pieces of art on the walls, instead of having to model every single one of these rooms by hand. But at the end of the day, it can actually waste you time and be less optimized, because if you have a Lego brick and you build a brick wall with it, then you have all these interior faces that are taking up light baked texture and have extra polygons that you don't need. And it's a bit of a waste. Saves you a lot of modeling time. But then when you go down to optimize everything and finish the model, and you need to cut out 20,000 polygons, then you have to go through, bake it all down, and you end up killing the modularity anyway.
Got it, yeah.
So that's kind of modular design and optimization. This stuff up here was a mess.
Yeah, imagine. How did you build that?
I actually started with the floor plan. Started with the floor plan like that. It had this other piece here, obviously. And then I think I just inset all of these. Let's see, what is... I'm a little bit used to Maya right now, which I
Yeah, me too. Blender is totally new, and sometimes it's confusing.
Let's check it out. I just have this, just have that little inset there.
Yeah.
And then extrude that up or down, delete it, something like that. And then I bent it down. So on the very, very original one, let me back this up. This is very February 2021, so almost a year old. Let's go to here. this is kind of, oh yeah, I forgot I had a big theater over here. That was cool. I should bring that back. But I have this floor texture, this earth texture, and you can see the proportions are all different. It's way taller, way smaller. Damn, it's not bad though. I kind of like it. Let's see, I already made this thing. I expected that I had not. But yeah, each one of these rooms is its own room, and these are the walls that I was talking about as being actually each one of the walls is a half wall, and the half wall has been duplicated a bunch of times. And let's see if I'm smart. Yep, they're all linked. They're not linked to each other though, which I think I did have at one point. But yeah, those interior walls are just soaking up texture space, and so I had to go through and connect these, right? And see that slice down the middle there? Fill that in. And
yeah, it's like a movie set in a way.
Exactly. Hey, Misha, how you doing?
Good.
These polygons here, like let me undo that. There we go. I just take all these polygons and just merge at center and do it like that. So instead of having 1, 2, 3, 4, well, actually, I don't know if that actually optimizes it that much. There's an n-gon though, but it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 triangles. And then when I merge it, it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 triangles, 7 triangles, because this is a quad. So it goes from 11 to 7. And you might think, well, that's not really that big of a deal. And it's not. But when you go from 11 to 7 here, and you go from 6 to 4 here, and 6 to 4, and then 6 to 4, and then all the way around, and then multiply that by 7 all the way around, then you end up getting like quite a bit of optimization. But it's worth doing the calculation on what actually is the optimization. Oh, check this out. These are all individual pieces. On what is the level of optimization, because you might spend 2 hours, 3 hours optimizing for like 200 polygons. Probably not worth it. Like, it's probably just have the 200 polygons. Not a big deal. This is how it started. Right? And I love these like little hallways that you could travel in between the rooms to. That's so awesome. And you know what? May actually come back to this now that I'm smarter about optimization.
Actually, it's very cool, the little hallway.
Yeah, because you could sneak around and you can find little stuff and have little adventures with people and stuff. So it's like that would be pretty cool. Here's the Basilica reference. So yeah, and you know what? Like, this may be worth revisiting, but you know, it's a sketch in a sketchbook, right? You got to keep moving on.
Mhm.
And let me just, I'll go back to like one of the later ones as I started to flesh this out, because I think, yeah, this piece right here is basically, I have everything set up that lends itself to creating this ceiling. And the whole point of this ceiling was to cast cool shadows. Like, that's the whole point of it. I wanted cool shadows to be going across the environment. And you know, in some of my super early tests, let me see if I still have them. I should. No, these are after they've all turned into WebGL. You can see the lighting has changed a bunch of times. Yeah, this is like the original intention of kind of like what things were going to look like. Where you have this really cool lighting going across everything. Nice and warm. And then the rooms on the inside are darker. But they have that lighting going across the top. But I needed to have the walls well lit for the art. But yeah, you can see like iteration after iteration after iteration after iteration, and things start to get a little bit watered down. And so it is a task to try to stay true to that original intention. But this is a way more functional space. Like, it's way bigger. It's way easier to walk around in. You can have larger groups of meetings in here. And we've had a few events in this space, and that it works. Like people meet up and they talk in here, and they meet up over there, and they talk over there, and people walk around and explore. So it is working, though. It's gone through so many different design changes. And you can drag this and throw it. Yay! But yeah, that's kind of the gist of it, as well as I added the secret. I'm flying right now, that's why I'm not stuck on the ground, but I added the secret path here that you can go through. One of these little things isn't as big as the other ones, so you can actually walk through this, and then you can walk up the ramp.
Nice.
And I'll skip to the end. And just walk up the ramp. And then you could be hanging out up here with your homies and like looking at everyone beneath you like, haha, suckers. And they'll be able to hear you, but unless they look up, they won't be able to see you.
That's cool.
Yeah, so it's little stuff like that actually rewards time investment. So the longer that you spend time in the space, the more that you discover about it. And it intrigues you to continue coming back, because you're like, oh, what else will I find? Instead of it, because a lot of what's happening right now with these virtual spaces is you load in, they're ghost towns. You load in, you go, whoa, cool, this is so cool. And then after like 10 minutes, you're like, okay, what next? And you either move them to a new environment, or you have an engaging social interaction where we have an interview, or we have art to look at, or where the artist is here, let's talk to the artist, or there's something to do. Otherwise it just looks like what it looks like right now, empty, right? It's just a ghost town. But if the more Easter eggs that you have, and the more little discoverable things that reward time investment, the better your design is, and the more people are going to stick around and experiment. And just play in the space and start to create memories and experiences that are attached to the space and the lighting and the feeling and the models and all that stuff. So if you come back here 2 years from now, you're like, oh my God, it looks so crappy compared to the stuff we're doing now, but I had some really great times here. It's a bit like the 007, like GoldenEye impression, like everyone remembers GoldenEye like way better than it is. If you replay GoldenEye now, you're like, wow, I can't believe I ever had any fun doing this. But when you think of GoldenEye, it's like, the nostalgia and the happiness and the feelings. And so that's actually part of what we're doing here in Metaverse spaces, is creating the opportunity for those memories and nostalgic moments to be cultivated in your customers and consumers. And in your guests, the people that are visiting your space. So that's kind of that. What do you guys think? What are any questions that you guys have on any of the topics we've covered so far, or any other topics?
So modeling has to be very low poly, right?
Yep, 50K max is right now what they're suggesting, but it's worth noting that this polygon limit affects load time, but it doesn't affect playback time. So it will take longer to load onto the device. And some devices, like my phone, don't have enough space to load in a 100K environment.
Yeah.
But there have been some galleries that are way bigger than 50K, and it just takes an extra minute to load, but once it's loaded, it's in.
Mm-hmm.
Well, also, isn't there an option for like level streaming yet, or no?
No, not yet.
Okay.
You mean
I
like
don't know.
offline computing, like where they just send you they send you the rendered frame by frame?
Sort of, but more like just like getting the level to like sections of the level to appear as you're walking.
No, yeah, I don't think so. No, I think it all loads at once. But what they're doing is what they're optimizing is, because you can split these out into different rooms, right? So I can bring in this link here, and drop it in here. And what they're focusing on is actually getting the transition. This is because this is on Hubs and this one's on MetaHood. They're not connected. But
Right.
if they were on the same Hubs platform, then clicking on this link will actually just swap out the environment without having to do a reload. So
Right,
we're
right.
starting to get there where it's like scene transition is getting faster and faster. And it may get to the point where entering this room triggers the next scene loading. And then you just pop into the next
Right.
world. And so we're getting there, but it's not quite there yet.
Right, right, right. And I would assume also in the case of wearing a VR headset too, right?
Yeah. Yeah, well, the VR headsets are really lower end access hardware, same as mobile devices. It's really quite
Right.
it's quite challenging for those devices.
Something you said sort of perked my ears. Of course, my interest is always in game design, entertainment, and that sort of field. You said something. Obviously, you're using Leonardo's work, to create the sort of structure and environment here. And then, did you create the ramp and like everything else?
Yes.
Yeah. So there's probably a reason for that. Is that there's always this latent desire, I think, in the human mind where we get bored, we start looking around for opportunities to not be bored. And one of the funny things that you mentioned was just how, like, in the human brain, we're always sort of we're unwittingly or unknowingly seeking these patterns. And this means that, the architecture that you've created, you've actually gamified,
Right.
whether you're aware of it or not, which means that people who are building these environments should actually be invoking elements or knowledge, or even hiring individuals who work in level design, because the opportunity as this expands to create these immersive and interactive atmospheres would get even higher. And I think, that's really good because, I mean, if you look at the mobile gaming industry, you can tell that that's very excellently monetized. And not that that's the goal, but I do think that were I a big business person and looking to make money and looking to invest into developers building these sorts of environments, that's where I would be interested, because I think that we're looking at, and this is my humble opinion, we're looking at the sort of next .com boom moving into meta. I think that even in science fiction, really good science fiction, they're always existing in a metaverse, right?
Yep.
It wasn't called a metaverse, but it was called something similar. And
No
I
doubt.
think that merging these ideas, getting level designers in there, making interactive environments that don't bog your machine down too much, but give people a little agency, would
Exactly.
be really, really exciting. So I just figured I'd point that out. I love that there's game design involved already at this
Oh
level.
yeah, you're 100% on the nose, and in fact, like you're so right about that point, that it's not just like exciting, but it's going to be mortal if you don't have it, compared to the people that do. Right. So if you don't have those level design elements that gamify just by the nature of the design, then your spaces are going to be very boring compared to the people that do, and the people that do are just going to get more users, more customers, more guests, more attention. Right.
Yeah. About 10 years ago, I watched an economist, published economist. I think it was Alan Rifkin. I could be wrong. He was discussing the next evolution in marketing, but more specifically, he called it the Internet 2.0. And I hadn't thought about it until this conversation today. But this is sort of reminding me of what he was discussing, the next evolution of, how we surf for content, how we find it, and how we buy it, sort of involving meta as well.
Totally.
I know that Google Glass tried to do this with their headsets, where you could like look at various products from various stores and get comparisons and compare it to prices locally. That way you get the best deal,
Totally.
But it didn't occur to me until now that Meta could probably be taking over that sort of evolution in the future, where people can simply go to various people and just be like, oh, I want to look at this. And then you get a detailed 3D look at different things. Anyway, I'm just spreading excitement. I think it's all very interesting.
That's Web3. That's Web3. We're here. We're on the next wave, the next evolution of the internet. It's blockchain, decentralization, and metaverse, and it's gonna. Yep, it's the next evolution. And there's a lot of opportunity for 3D artists, for artists of all types, for creators of all types. There's so much opportunity.
Yeah, and I just want to point out, I found out it's Jeremy Rifkin. I got the name wrong, but if
perfect.
anybody wanted to look it up, I think it's funny. He was foretelling the sort of meta involvement,
That's
a
awesome.
decade ago.
That's awesome. Well, guys, that's about an hour. So if I'm happy to close her off here. I think I'm gonna grab some breakfast and then I'm gonna do another stream where I'm just building out. I'll show you guys what I'm starting with a new space. Let's see, I forget what it's called. What did I even call it? Do I even have a name for it? Maybe it's just practice? No. Gallery Leonardo. Geez, I don't even remember. Oh, maybe it's design. Yeah, I started a new space. Looks something like this. I'm not completely sold on these donuts yet. I mean, they'll probably be invisible from the outside, but something like this where you actually enter in here. And I thought this was a bit more progressed than it was, but this would be a huge window. Let's see. No, this is. Do I not have a newer version of this? No, this is older. Yeah, so I'm just designing like these different volumes to see. It's kind of Sydney Opera House-esque, but I want it to be a little bit more Blade Runner and a little bit more like evil building.
You mean like a megacorp?
Yeah, totally. Something like where you enter here. Yeah, you enter here, you walk forward. There's going to be like 3 big rooms, one on the right, one in the middle, one on the left. And if you enter into these rooms, then they'll actually be rotating. And so you can see, oops, it's rotating at a weird angle. You can actually see like art or text or whatever go by as they're just always rotating. And so again, this is like gamifying, like turning level design into an interactive thing. So you walk into this space and you spend time here because you can't see it any faster. You have to wait for it to go through its whole course before you have all that content. And then again on the other side, which will be a new one. It's a different one. And you'll be able to look at this one and it will be rotating in a different direction or whatever, and it will have different content. And then a hangout area in the front here, like a hallway where you enter in, and there's a hangout area. And I'm just turning off my phone here. And then you have those 2 options, and then there's one at the end here where I'm thinking like these big rooms lead your character up until the final one that's rotating here. And maybe I should actually just had this idea, but maybe I should rotate this like this. That would be sweet. So it's actually rotating in a different direction, and you'll look straight forward at the wall in front of you. And the wall in front of you will just change like this. Yeah, that would be so awesome. So again, it's just giving, time, rewarding people that spend more time in the space to see more, to be engaged more, to be entertained more, and to have more information. Let's see, let's see this one right here. Yeah, I've got like some cool, oh yeah, so this is a slightly different version. Yeah, this is a little bit more fleshed out. You got this little entranceway there, and then you have the room to the left and the room to the right, the donuts to the left and right, and like above you have these shadows being casted through the ceiling lights here, through these like holes where they're casting this crazy pattern across the floor. and a super crazy refractive triangle like diamond thing that's just shining all this red light. Yeah, it's a little bit like Megacorp, a little bit like just a little bit more dystopian, but I'm still experimenting because I want it to have a nice, it looks like a monkey right now. It's a little bit silly. So I'm experimenting with the different styles and different looks that could come out of this. But the intention is to have these like rotating toruses.
It's a cool idea.
Thanks. And yep, and I'm just blocking this out in 3D, and so I'm gonna start slapping some stuff down on this, making a design workflow, like a design. Hey Nick, how you doing? A design
How are you?
worksheet. Doing great. So that way I have like a mood board of all the references of the materials, of the architecture, of all the different styles and stuff, and I can draw upon that because, you know, the whole last gallery was built entirely off of the Leonardo da Vinci Basilica sketch, and this one, like, I really want to take to the next level and have a lot more interactive design elements that I don't have to. It's not a button. You don't walk up and press a button, have something happen, because that implies coding, and we're not entering into that realm. I just want to be able to do stuff that's creative and clever with the architecture itself.
And what about water?
Mm-hmm.
Is
So-
it something possible to?
Hubs has water. Let's see, hubs.mozilla.com/spoke. Let me just open up a scene here. Let's see, do any of these have? No. This one's got a type of water. It's not the water that I was. Yeah, this is the more common way of doing water, I would say. And I'll turn off the grid. And it does animate. So it looks a little bit like this. So I'll just enter this room. And this one is a different way of doing water. This is actually speaking to your point, Sean, about level design. You know, the artist that built this actually works for Hubs. And its level design is absolutely brilliant. Like you have an alleyway for behind each one of these that connects perfectly in. It's like all very modular, and you can walk around and up through the back here and then over, like you can hop over the wall and then go all the way over here and then hop over. It's designed very much like a first person shooter or something like that, or even like an art, you know, like an adventure game, but it's all like modularly contained. And you have this water going on here.
It is moving. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's moving, and it's, you know, just kind of breathing up and down. Let's see.
Harry, what is that platform you're using on the site there?
This one right here is Spoke.
Spoke.
Yeah, Spoke is a scene compiler for Mozilla Hubs.
Okay.
And it's an open source scene compiler. So in here we have like the model, the bake model, the sun, and the floor plan, which is where you're able to walk, and then all these waypoints. So you can actually like sit up here on these chairs and like have a conversation if you could get up there, which I don't think you can without. But yeah, the Spoke is the scene compiler for which everything in Mozilla Hubs runs. And so you export out stuff out of Blender and you import it into Spoke and you publish it from Spoke. Now there is a way to skip Spoke altogether by just hitting import from Blender and skipping that straight in. But then you have to add in like your waypoints and your spawn points and whatever it is in Blender, which is a little bit more convoluted than it is in Spoke. But right now, Spoke doesn't actually have a way to create the environment maps, the reflection environment maps, which I think I'm going to talk about next week. So if you want to have environment maps reflecting, then you actually need to bypass Spoke. You need to just do that straight publish scenes from Blender tool. But
Cool.
Oh, I,
Yeah, maybe you share a link because I'd like to see that.
yeah, totally. For the environment map stuff.
Yeah, well, like just spoke in general, yeah, just and
Yeah,
maybe if
yeah,
there's
sure.
any scenes existing that I could just browse and
Oh,
see how
yeah.
they're built.
Yeah, totally. Just check out hubs.com. Yeah, I'll just drop this into the Discord. This is yeah, it's awesome. Definitely worth checking out. Um
Cool.
and there's a lot of different spaces in here that are just open for people to check out.
Nice.
So
And are you allowed to like reach out to the people and see if you can add content to their scenes or no?
when you publish a scene on Spoke, you have the option to allow it to be remixable, and
Oh, okay.
everything that's in here, like that's in the project, like project archives here, where if you hit new project, all of these are allowed to be remixable.
Sweet.
And there's more, like there's a lot of different ones that people have up on their own website or whatever.
Right.
But this is like an example of the moving toruses. But yeah, so this one isn't animated. I don't know why. I thought it would be. No, it's actually loop animation. Yeah, it doesn't have an animation. But you can, like, if I delete this water and I add in this water, this is a simple water element, and that's what it looks like. And I can scale it up, and I can set the tide scale and set the tide speed, set the wave height. Let's see. There we go. Something like that. Wave speed, ripple speed. Now it's like really trippy. Ripple scale. So you do have some controls. Obviously, it's not like the most fleshed out. Like it's pretty basic.
Yeah, but I was thinking like if I wanna add a little swimming pool or this kind of thing, like
Yeah,
I can do it.
you can do it. Yeah, and it's very basic. But another thing that you can also do is you can add in Hubs, you can add a component, or in Blender, you can add a component, like Hubs component, that is something called a UV scroll, that's actually going to animate your UVs in a direction at a certain pace, like in steps, or smoothly. But this is U and this is V, right? And what UV scroll does is it gives you the opportunity to animate a tileable ripple texture. You see, like there's speed on X, yeah, and that actually, like, if I skip towards the end here, this is Dom and Jim, by the way. They both work at Mozilla. They're both epic, and they develop a lot of this stuff. But yeah, you can add noise to it. Actually, is it noisy or is it just wavy UVs? I think it might just be wavy UVs. I'm not sure if they've added noise to that. Yeah, it's wavy UVs, and then you get this type of look, right?
That's cool.
Yeah, and there's a lot you can do with this, especially if you're stretching out the UVs. You can see how it's like spreading out as it gets further apart, which is what happens in real life. And then you could add down here like some sprites of splashes to kind of cover and mix that transition. But that's pretty sweet, right? Like I like the way that works.
Yeah.
And this
UV scroll.
UV scroll, yeah, and it's super simple, and also it can do stuff like lights, because you just have like a 1:16 pixel texture, and it's just red and black, and then you're UV scrolling it at a certain speed, and now you've got a blinking red light for 16 pixels. It's like, it's really inexpensive.
Mm-hmm.
It's like super, yeah, and like this is another example. They just did like a dance floor, right? It's just a super 4:32 pixel texture, super low resolution, but you put it over these polygons, and then all of a sudden they're like, the UVs of them are dancing around the different colors. It's pretty nice. And you can use so this is another clever way of creating parallax. There's a lot of stuff that you could use these tools very creatively. I think UV scroll is super duper powerful. And he didn't show in this video, because there's the increment tool, you can actually do sprite animation with it as well. So like, if you have a sprite texture sheet like this, like this one, right? Or like this one that's a little bit easier to see, then you can have it animate across, but actually in increments so that it pops to the next frame. So something like this would actually be going dot, 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 and you'd actually see it smoothly animate that texture. So
Nice.
it's a way of doing animated textures without actually having a sequence. So you could have this just increment, as long as you have the increment set. So there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So you probably need to have this at like whatever 100 divided by 8 is, like 0.16 or whatever. So that way it evenly pops from this one to this one to this one to this one to this one at whatever the speed that you want it to. And then you would even increment. I guess you could be able to increment it down. So it goes 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and then increments down 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, increments down. And then you can get this whole, 648 by 648 texture to actually be an animated GIF, or it's very much like a GIF. It's not a GIF, but very similar to one. And you can actually see some of this working in the avatars, because they have some of these avatars that are using the UV scroll, like this one. And if I look at myself here, see, there I go. That's my avatar, dancing dude. Right. So it's very basic. This is going back to like 1990s video game technology, right? But it works, and it's super efficient, and it's super duper optimized, and it is the starting point. So basically the opportunity here is to learn how things are done from a baseline level. So that way, when they do update this, when they're like, oh, okay, now we support multi-sequence textures and stuff, and now we've changed the UV scroll to be able to do whatever, to take in specific coordinates or whatever adjustments that they make, you're actually building on the experience that you have, starting with more primitive tools. That's why John Carmack, who like built Quake, is still the most highly regarded game designer on Earth. Unless Sean wants to prove me wrong there with a counter opinion. But, John Carmack is like one of the legends of game design, and he's actually working for Facebook now on Meta, because he's still like the guy, because he built Quake, and it's just like he knows how all this shit works really, really well. So it's a good time to get in, because, especially for people in here, like if you become really good at this, your knowledge is extremely sought after, and you can make money either building or renting or teaching, because a lot of people are consulting. Like a lot of people are going to want to know this stuff. This year, 2022, is going to be huge for every company in the world, every business in the world, trying to figure out, oh, what does our meta space look like? And what should we do? And how should we think about it? Right. And so that's why, I'm trying to educate this as much as I can to offload some of this value that I have, so we can start growing together and growing the space and giving alternatives to, the massive corporations that have metaverse companies. The one.